Matthias, you will always get this beauty. So just to make sure, I think you probably know this, but to make sure everybody knows, today in USA is a day that we have once a year. Usually the second Sunday or first Sunday in May, I forget which. Second Sunday in May. And we call it Mother's Day. And so today we honor our mothers in one way or another. So I encourage all of you to do something today to honor your mother, even if it's to send a message, or if she is not with you anymore, to honor her memory. So that's a big thing for us in our culture is Mother's Day. Something good about our culture, I think. Anyway, what we're going to do today to start our class is to go back to Matthew 18. It's a long chapter, and you may remember I said last time it is the fourth of 5 great speeches that, yes, John? Yeah, I think what we want to do is ring that bell at 9:40 and 9:45.
Gotcha.
That's based on memory, but that's probably close enough. You can check.
All right, I appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
you bet. Okay, great. So we're going to go back to Matthew 18. It's the fourth of 5 long speeches that Jesus makes. This one is all about what? If you get an A today, if you can remember, Matthew 18, we group it all together as a speech or a discourse or a lecture, and we say the topic Jesus is dealing with in this chapter is what? What is this speech all about? Matthias, do you remember?
Talking about the kingdom of heaven.
Something particular about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is kind of like an overarching theme of the whole book of Matthew. But Matthew 18 deals with a particular aspect of the kingdom. And what is it? Does anybody remember? He starts off talking about what? They come and they say, who is the greatest? Remember that? And then there's this business about, causing other people to sin and bringing back the lost sheep and so forth and so on. So Matthew 18, and this isn't, this is just me. This is not part of the Bible, but I think it's a good way to kind of get a handle on. It's about relationships between disciples in the kingdom. Everything here has something to do with that. So, at the end of the chapter, we have kind of a long parable, as parables go, about the 2 servants. And my translation, and maybe in yours, start at verse 21. Well, that's great. Starting in verse 21, we have the parable of the unmerciful servant. I say it's a parable of the 2 servants. Okay. So we're going to work on this a little bit together and see what we can learn from it. So what I'd like to do is start off by reading together. And we'll just all read a little bit, okay? So, Sing Song, if you would read like the first 4 or 5 verses, and we'll just go around the room and we'll all read a little bit, okay? So, when you read starting in verse 21.
Verse 21.
18:21.
Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?
Good.
Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who was who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. I'll stop there.
Okay.
25.
Verse 25.
Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to pay the debt.
26, Jason.
So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." Now, in pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt.
But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient, and I will pay you back."
But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could repay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. And then the master called the servant in. "You wicked servant," he said. "I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. And this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. Matthias, please make sure that Ming and Thomas have handouts. Ming, we are so glad to see you here today. We are glad because you are Ming, but we're also glad because how can we have a class on Mother's Day with no mothers? You're here, so now we have a mother in our class. That's great. That's great. Okay, so anyway, this story about the servant, the unmerciful servant. Now, just to get a handle on this thing here, how much does the first servant owe the master? How much does he owe? What does it say?
That's 10,000 bags of gold.
Okay, it depends on your translation. Now, the newer translations say 10,000 bags of gold. Okay, but actually, the older translations are more accurate to the original Greek text, and they say 10,000 talents, a huge sum of money. Okay, and then what about the second guy? What does he owe? 100 denarii. And some translations, the newer ones will say 100 silver coins. So bags of gold and silver coins and denarii. Well, the value of money changes through time, and it's hard to figure all this out. But here's one way we can look at it. The idea here that they're trying to get across is that this is a lot more than this. Okay, we all get that, but we want to let that sink in a bit. This is not nothing. Okay, it's not like $1. It's not like a penny. Because we know other places in the New Testament, they say that this denarii is a day's wage, okay? So think about the amount of money you make in 100 days. Most of us work, our work week is 5 days. A lot of us do some work on the weekend too. But anyway, let's just say 5 days. So that's 20 weeks. That's about 5 months of work, okay? So this is about how much money you would make in 5 months. How much money is this? 10,000 talents, 10,000 bags of gold. Well, here's an idea. You may, if you're a student of the New Testament, from time to time, you may run into the name Josephus. Who can help us? He's not in the Bible, by the way, but he's a writer. Who can tell us something about Josephus? Jim, do you know something about Josephus?
Oh, I was thinking along another line. No, I think you better.
Okay, Josephus is a historian. He was a Jew, And he took part in the great revolt against the Romans in 70 AD. Now, when the revolt was over, the Romans crucified most of the Jews that they captured and killed all the, But Josephus was really a clever guy. And somehow he got in good with the Romans, and they took him to Rome, and he wrote a long history of the Jewish nation, which we have now. It's not easy reading, but it's a great source of information about first century Jews. He tells us a lot about the politics, the geography, the whole thing. And you see him quoted a lot in Bible study books, Josephus. And Josephus tells us that about the time that Jesus was alive, if you take all the provinces where Jews lived, like Galilee, Judea, Perea, all these different places around, and you added up all the taxes that they paid to Rome for 1 year, it came to 800 talents. Okay, to make this simple, let's just do an order of magnitude analysis here. Let's round that up to 1,000, okay? Just you and me, 1,000. Now let's try to think about the amount of federal tax, income tax, that's paid by all the states in the southeastern United States, okay? Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, we'll throw Texas in there too, okay? So what would that come to, do you think? Have an idea? You're a federal employee, Jason. That's what you live off of. How much money do you think paid federal income tax by the southeastern United States? What do you think?
Not a small amount.
What?
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
So I would think it would be short of $1 trillion, but probably several hundred million. Okay, several $100 million. So we got the amount of money you make in 20 weeks, and then several $100 million. Now, somebody did some more thinking about this, and they said, well, you go through this kind of reasoning, and this right here is 600,000 times greater than this. If this is 1, this is 600,000 up here, okay? So now then, let's kind of think about that. If we were to draw a bar chart to compare these two amounts, that's what we like to do. We teach kids to do this. Now, if we draw a bar chart, and we say, okay, here's our bar chart, and here's servant 2, and here's servant 1. And so, to do this, we're going to make the bar for servant 2 just as small as we can make it. So what we'll do, some of you have mechanical pencils in your drawer or in your desk, and does anybody know how thick the lead is in a really good mechanical pencil? 0.5, or there's some out there that if you're really a picky engineer, it's 0.2 millimeters. 0.2 millimeters. So this is going to be thicker than 0.2 millimeters, but you get the idea. Okay? So that's about the thinnest line that we can draw and see. It's 0.2 millimeters. Then if we multiply 0.2 millimeters times 600,000, when I did that, I got 12 meters. So servant 1 is the bar is about 40 feet high. It goes through the roof and all the way up. Just think about that. Okay, so we have all of this anger, and it's almost funny, isn't it? It's almost funny, except when you happen to be servant number 1. Now, let's just pretend that you're servant number 1 for a minute, okay? And you get hauled in, and there's this huge debt, and you can't pay it. The guy forgives you, and you're on your way out, and here you see a guy that owes you some money. How do you explain or excuse your behavior? What's your side of the story?
Well, you just don't think about what was done for you. You're just thinking about what the other guy owes you and not what was done for you.
Right.
Just don't think about it.
Right. Yeah, we have binoculars, and we look through the binoculars one way when it's us that owes, and in another way when somebody owes us, right? Yeah, that's natural. Okay, somebody else. Anybody else have an idea? I think people tend to get very angry when they are frightened. Is there any reason on this particular situation where servant 1 could be frightened? What do you think? Thomas, what do you think? Why does this guy act this way? Now you're his lawyer, okay? You got to defend him. What's his excuse? Surely he can come up with some excuse. I mean, lawyers can excuse anything, can't they? So what do you say? How do you think he got to be this deep in debt?
That's why.
Because people like this didn't pay him. That's how he got to be this deep in debt. You see, he's not irresponsible. It's people like this that drove him into such deep debt. And so he's come within an eyelash of ruining his whole life, his whole family's life. And here comes in this guy that owes him this money, he's never paid him back. He's the cause of all the trouble. Don't you see that? And that's his excuse. He's scared to death, and this is the cause of all of his trouble, and so he takes it out on this guy. Wouldn't you? You just see it a little bit different that way, don't you? Okay, now, we're feeling a little passive today, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little in-class assignment, okay? Let me number you off. Remember your number. You're 5, Thomas. Listen, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6. Okay, so what I want you to do is take your number and turn to that chapter of Matthew. And yes, 5, 6, 7 is what? The Sermon on the Mount. So for example, if you got 5, turn to Matthew 5. And I want you just to kind of scan it and see if you see anything that pertains to this situation. You know, we've talked about the Sermon on the Mount kind of being the charter for the whole book, the framework for the whole book, you know, the way we live in the kingdom. If you don't have a Bible, there's some on the rack over here that you could grab. But anyway, if you've got one, access to one. So take your chapter and look at it and see if you see anything that applies to this situation. Okay, I know I didn't give you much time, but we'll work together on this. I won't put you on the spot too much. Who had 5? Who has 5? Matthias and Thomas? Anybody else got 5? Oh, sing song. Okay, so what did you guys notice? What teaching in the Sermon on the Mount would kind of apply to this situation here? Just chapter 5. Okay? Anybody find anything? Matthias?
I think I got 2 things. Like one, the first servant was not merciful, the first one.
Uh-huh.
And in 5:7, we see, blessed are the merciful, they will be shown mercy.
Great. So here we have in the Beatitudes, blessed are the merciful. And I think when the master kind of sorts things out at the end, he said, shouldn't you have shown mercy? Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had on you? Jesus likes to use this word mercy or compassion, or Matthew, the writer, uses it a good bit. Certainly a trait that we need to cultivate. So that mercy and compassion, Okay, anything else in chapter 5? Anybody else find anything?
In 38, I think it was, since the second servant had not paid him, he was trying to revenge.
Help me again, say that again.
5 verse 38, eye for an eye for eye.
Oh,
He was trying to revenge by choking the second servant.
yeah. So, I'm sorry, I still didn't hear the number of the verse in chapter 5.
Did I skip to 38?
Okay, yeah, 38. You know, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, all that kind of stuff. So this idea of vengeance. There is one other one here that I spotted, and this is kind of, doesn't have to do with mercy, but it has to do with the behavior of that first servant. Does anybody see what I'm talking about?
Verse 25.
Yeah. Why don't you read that? Well, that's not exactly the one I was thinking about, but that's a good one. Go ahead and read that and comment on it if you want to, Jason.
I didn't say that. I'm not sure who said that.
Somebody said verse 25?
I said it.
Oh, I'm sorry. My hearing is so crazy. I thought it came out of Jason. Please sing something. Oh, Thomas said it? Okay. You can tell I'm clueless with these masks on. I'm sorry. We're going to get rid of the mask eventually, but go ahead, Thomas.
Read 25.
Yeah.
Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way. Your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown in prison.
So I think if we get the context of that, he's encouraging a conciliatory approach to interpersonal conflict. So that's a legitimate use of that passage. Also, the one that I had in mind is the one that deals with anger. The one that deals with anger, because he got so angry with the guy who was choking him, and it says, verse 22, anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. And closely tied to this is this use of this term, raka, which in the Aramaic, the original language of Jesus and his followers, was a term of contempt. So there's certainly a lot of anger and contempt involved in the... Okay, so chapter 6, great work, people. I know I'll give you like 0 time to scan this, so you really had to be nimble. What about chapter 6? Anything in chapter 6 that applies to this situation of these two servants?
Verse 12.
Okay, great. Yeah, that one's kind of hanging out there for you. And what is that?
And forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors.
You know, we pray this Lord's Prayer. In our culture, we wear this Lord's Prayer out. I don't know, maybe in other parts of the country they don't do this anymore because they're trying to become more secular, but in our part of the country, it's very customary for young people, kids, teenagers, when they have a sports team, soccer, football, whatever, cross country, the team gets together and repeats the Lord's Prayer before the competition. Don't ask me, that's the way we do it. And so we go through this verse and we say, forgive me the way I forgive other people. You know, I really don't want to pray that prayer. I really don't, because I want God to forgive me a lot more than I'm willing to forgive other people. Frankly. If that's the standard, and he says that it is, you know, I'd really like to apply for mercy on that. I want much more forgiveness than I'm willing to give other people. That's the truth. And so this is, anybody else see something else in chapter 6 that we should apply to the unmerciful servant here?
Rather than particular verses, the entire chapter, I think, parallels our story.
And
The first 3 parts of the chapter are about giving in
Okay.
order to be seen by other people as
Uh-huh.
a better giver than other people. About praying and being seen by other people as a great prayer, you know, and about fasting better than other people. But then it turns, and it's about you and your relationship to God, and that He's the one you rely on, and He will take care of you. So we have both the relationship to God in this story, to the Lord that forgives him, and the relationship to other people, in this case, him and the people who owe him. And so I see the same character flaw. Maybe I'm assuming too much, but it's this thing that we're all built in with, have built in this bias that I'm better than other people. And it's not, it's directly opposed to humility that we have to have if we understand our relationship to God. That should make us humble. But in fact, it fails on many of us, and then we go about playing this game, I'm better than you.
Mm-hmm.
You owe me, pay me. You know? So I sort of see this fellow falling in the middle of the way so many of us behave.
This kind of humility, I think, is introduced in the sermon in chapter 5, verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit. A person who's poor in spirit is not going to have these issues that you describe there of better than others, different from others. You know, it's.
So what I'm saying is that our relationship to God should teach us humility that we then extend to our relationships to other people. You know, like in Philippians 2, Paul says we ought to consider others better than ourselves. But we don't do that unless we make a concentrated effort to be humble. And it just doesn't happen by accident.
Also, that the anger and lack of security that caused the anger that the first servant felt, if our security is based on a relationship with God and not how much money we owe, then we'll be able to extend mercy. And
well, on a different line of thought, I suspect, I imagine, I attribute to this person this feeling that when he was forgiven, he probably figured, well, that's what I deserve.
Exactly.
You know, I deserve. He treated me very well because
Yeah.
I'm such a great person.
Yeah.
And then you go out and all these other people are not such great people. I think
Yeah.
I'm just going to extract from them what they owe me. Period.
Exactly. A
Now,
sense of entitlement.
I'm trying to lead up to a point that in 1 John chapter 1, verse 3, John tells the reason we proclaim Christ. And he says in that verse, so that you may have fellowship with us, and our fellowship is with the Father and his Son.
Mhm.
So John is saying that the body of the saved, the kingdom of heaven, the church, if you please, is in fact a community of connected individuals, people with other people, and all of them with God and Jesus. This is the eternal fellowship. Well, it's here. It's not just that the servant ought to act like his master, like his Lord.
Mhm.
It's about the relationship with his Lord. How can you be in fellowship with God if your heart is different? And so we have in this story, let's see, I'm in the wrong place, give me a second here. There were two phrases. As I had mercy on you,
Mhm.
and from your heart.
From the heart.
The issue is your heart like God's heart. And if it's not, you don't know God, he doesn't know you. There's a person in judgment who's condemned, and Jesus says, I never knew you. Not you weren't good enough, not you didn't do good deeds. I never knew you. You and I were not like this.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, well, this is great. This is kind of I'm going to say the punchline to the parable, because you did not forgive your brother from your heart. And as so much of Christianity, it has to do with the inner person, the heart, the attitude. I will say this much from experience, though. When we are angry, when we are threatened or hurt by another person, sometimes it's very difficult to forgive them from the heart. But sometimes, if we tell ourselves we're going to act, we're going to behave in a certain way as though we forgive them, it's easier to bring the heart around. Sometimes you have to get your arms and legs moving to get the heart in the right direction. I just offer that as a suggestion. Anyway, so great. Let's jump on chapter 7 for a second and see if you guys were able to find anything. I think we had 2 7ers here. Who were the 7ers? Philemon, were you? Oh, Ming is a 7, and we are 7. Okay, Ming, what did you find?
I think it's verse 1 to 4.
Would you read that, please?
Okay, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And
Oh.
with the measure you use,
Oh.
it will be
Yeah, so true, so true. So that is, I'm going to just put that section on there, 7, 1 through 4. And this parable is a graphic example. You know, the first servant, he gets mercy, then he goes out and shows no mercy, and he comes back, the master shows no mercy. You know, so it's what you give, it's what you're going to get. Great. Anything else? Philemon, did you find something else in 7?
I think verse 9 to 12.
Okay, want to read that?
Which of you, if a son asks for the bread, will give him a stone? Or if asks for fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give a gift to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. So this sums up the role of the prophet.
Wow, that's so good, so good. Would you like to comment on that for us, Philemon? He says, your Father is generous. He's going to give you the things you need. And so, you have the wherewithal to be generous, compassionate, good, treat others the way you want to be treated. And certainly we see the way not to do that in this great parable. Well, we could spend some more time talking about Matthew 18. Let's just jump on to 19, and we'll just kind of do an introduction and maybe a treatment of this first section in chapter 19 today. I think I've told you that there's kind of a turn that occurs here in chapters 16, 17, 18, where it says, for example, 16:21, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer, and so forth and so on. Then in verse 1 of chapter 19, do you see that? When Jesus had finished saying these things, and we always have a statement like that at the end of one of these great speeches. So when he had finished saying these things, he did what? He left Galilee and went into the region of Judea. So he spent all the book of Matthew, except when he went to Egypt as a child, he spent up there around the Sea of Galilee. And some of the neighboring regions, Gerasene demoniac, Canaanite woman, Caesarea Philippi, but now he's headed south for his final journey. In the Gospel of John, there are several trips to Jerusalem. The synoptics only record one. I don't think that conflicts, but at any rate, this is the way that the action is staged in Matthew. Jesus is headed for Jerusalem, and he says something that I think is a little bit funny, to the other side of the Jordan. Well, which side is the other side? Well, that depends on which side you're on, right? I guess the other side means the other side from Jerusalem. So this is a region called Perea, and it's on the we would call it the West Bank today or something like that. It's on the what would that be? It's on the eastern side of the Jordan River, not the West Bank, but the eastern side of the Jordan River, modern day Jordan. Okay, so that's great. Not the West Bank, but the eastern side of the river. Large crowds followed him, and he's healed them there. Some Pharisees came to test him. Now, what is this business here? Testing. We've run into this several times before. What's Matthias? You take and give a lot of tests. Okay, so what is this test all about? Is it academic, or what's going on here?
They think they are wise than Jesus, so they are trying to place him in their own weighing machines. Like, let's see what he says.
They're trying to destroy his credibility by asking him what we call a loaded question. Okay, the perfect example of a loaded question, Jim, is: have you stopped beating your wife?
No.
So, how can you answer that question? Have you stopped beating your wife? And you can't answer the question. So anyway, that's the kind of question they're asking him here. Now, a little background on what's going on here with regard to, let's read the question first, and then we'll get into the background on it. Okay. So they asked him a question to test him. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Okay, back then, as today, divorce and marriage were controversial and difficult topics. And you'll see on your handout there are two names that you may not recognize, or you may, I don't know. And these are the names of the Jewish rabbis, the Jewish teachers that represented the two main schools of thought, conservative and liberal. We might say conservative and progressive today. And Shammai was represented the conservative school of thought among the Jewish teachers, the Jewish rabbis. And he said the only grounds for divorce are sexual immorality, like adultery, like going to bed with somebody else, okay? Sleeping with somebody else, having sex with somebody you're not married to. That's, you could divorce for that. Hillel, on the other hand, he goes to the other extreme, and he could say, what they did is, in the Old Testament passage, this controversy surrounds, is on your sheet here, okay? So he says, if a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, see, Shammai emphasized that word that we translate indecent, okay? But Hillel emphasized that word something, okay? And to him, something could mean that she burned his food. Okay, you know, anything like that. She's not a good cook. Get rid of her. Now, Hillel had a disciple, a student who became a prominent rabbi in his own right, Akiba. And Akiba says, well, not only that, but if he finds another woman that he thinks better looking, you know, one more fair. We say, you know, a younger model. You know, trade your, just like you trade a car, you trade a wife to get a younger one. So this is what these guys said. So you say these ideas are pretty far apart. So what these guys are thinking is Jesus has got to go one way or the other, and whichever way he goes, he's gonna alienate, he's gonna anger half the people out there. So it's truly a loaded question. Okay, so let's read Jesus' answer. Now, before we get into that, I want to say this much. I've spent a lot of time this week thinking about this passage. And what we have in chapter 19 is we got this teaching on marriage and divorce, okay? And then we have another little section about Jesus and the children. They bring the children to Jesus and all that sweet stuff there. And then we have the section that we call the story of the rich young man or the rich young ruler. At the end of this teaching on marriage and divorce, and at the end of the story about the rich young ruler, Jesus' followers, his disciples, his closest followers, tell him that he is nuts. They say, Jesus, you are just too hard. You're making it too difficult for us to follow you. You have set the bar way too high. Now, I know some of you teach courses or you have taught courses, and, you know, sometimes your students will say, we can't do all that work. It's just too much. Your test questions are too hard. We can't, you know, so that's what's going on here. They're saying, we can't follow you on this. I think if we're honest as we study these sections, we feel a little bit the same way. Okay, so this is very challenging stuff. So Jesus said, haven't you read that at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female? And he said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Now he's quoting here directly from where? You see the little quotation marks in your English translation there, the single quotes. It's coming right from where? Genesis, yeah. A man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. The two will become one flesh, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. The disciples said, if this is the situation between a husband and wife, it's better not to marry. And Jesus replied, not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who are born that way, and eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are those who chose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this teaching should accept it. Okay, we'll get into that bottom part probably next week. But what I want to call your attention to is the way that Jesus explains his answer. He goes all the way back to creation, to the fundamental nature of things. That we have a creator, that we have created beings, and these beings are created male and female. Now, you think this is pretty simple stuff. Our whole culture today is in a turmoil. We reject the notion of a creator, a different person that's out there, and we say that we live in a material universe and that society has created religion. Society has created God. That's the dominant thinking in much of our culture today. Secondly, get this, that biology is not reality. That you decide, you choose, you select, you identify your gender, that's separate and apart from your biological sexuality. And so this is something that it wasn't decided for you by your creator. It's something that you decide in light of your particular social situation. But Jesus goes back to the beginning. He said it wasn't this way from the beginning. God created them male and female. And then what he says is kind of earth-shaking. He said, two become one. That's the math, okay? So here's the math for marriage. According to Jesus and the book of Genesis, is the two become one. Okay, well, why is that so shocking? Well, because all these great heroes of the Old Testament, like Abraham, Isaac, not so much, certainly Jacob, have multiple wives. Polygamy is very, and the kings like David and Solomon, they lost count. They have multiple wives. But he doesn't say the 3 become one, or the 8 become one, or the 868 become one. He says the 2 become one. The 2 become one. So he says this is God's will for the family, for marriage from the beginning, that the 2 become one. Now, I don't think, I know there are some traditional societies in Africa where polygamy is still practiced. I know there's some Islamic places where polygamy is, but most of you are not interested in polygamy. I have told my friends that Becky and I were married for 44 years on Friday, by the way, praise God. But if you will stay married a long time, there's no need to be a polygamist, because your wife changes so much through the years that it gives you the experience of being married to 3 or 4 totally different women. Maybe more than that, I don't know. But anyway, believe me, it happens. So, at any rate, that's not such a thing for us. But this idea that, what about divorce? Is it lawful for any cause? Is something we need to struggle with and think about some this week. So I want to just, it's kind of an abrupt place to stop, but we're going to continue with chapter 19 next time. Any comments or questions before we close today? It's so great to have Ming back with us. Fully vaccinated by now, I hope? Have you had your shot? Great. That's great. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so we'll pick up here again next week. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you. It's been a year.